March 1st, 2 a.m. Somewhere over the Indian Ocean, 3 aircraft are flying at 60,000 feet with their navigation lights off. They left South Dakota 30 hours ago. They are not stealth aircraft. They are not invisible to radar. They are not the newest thing in the American inventory. In fact, 6 months earlier, the Pentagon was writing the paperwork to retire them permanently. Cracked airframes, aging avionics, a readiness rate that had collapsed to under 50%. And yet, on this night, these 3 aircraft are carrying more explosive payload than any other platform in the United States military could physically lift, pointed at targets buried hundreds of feet underground, near the most strategically important waterway on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. 20% of the world's oil passes through it every single day. And beneath the mountains flanking that strait, Iran had spent 30 years building something that was supposed to be untouchable. The question is not whether the B-1B Lancer showed up. The question is why nothing else could. If you want to understand why the bomber America almost threw away became the only aircraft that could solve the hardest targeting equation in this war, you are in the right place. This is Navy reality. We do not cover the headlines. We decode the equation behind them. Subscribe if that is the kind of analysis you are here for. To understand what the B-1B was sent to destroy, you have to understand what Iran actually built, and how long they spent building it. The program did not start last year. It did not start after 2015. It started in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War, when Iraqi Scud missiles began hitting Iranian cities. Tehran learned a brutal lesson very fast. Anything above ground is a target. After watching American air campaigns in Desert Storm, Allied Force, and Iraqi Freedom destroy surface infrastructure within days, Iran drew a single strategic conclusion. The only military asset you cannot lose is the one you bury deep enough, so they built what the IRGC calls missile cities, non-metaphorically, actual underground cities. Tunnel networks stretching for kilometers beneath mountain ranges, reinforced with hundreds of feet of rock and hardened concrete. Purpose-built to store ballistic missiles, fuel them underground, and launch them through reinforced shafts without ever exposing the system to satellite imagery or airstrikes. These are not simple bunkers. They are dispersed logistics networks, multiple entrance points, blast doors at intervals, parallel tunnel structures so that collapsing one section does not destroy the rest. The engineering is serious. 3 decades of refinement, informed by watching exactly how American air campaigns work. The complexes near the Strait of Hormuz are the most critical ones. They shelter anti-ship ballistic missiles, weapons specifically designed to hit moving aircraft carriers and tankers at sea. If those missiles survive, they threaten every vessel passing through Hormuz the moment Iran chooses to use them. For 30 years, no one had specifically targeted and destroyed a network like this at scale. The geometry was too hard. The depth was too great. The payload requirements exceeded what most aircraft could carry. That was Iran's calculation, and for 30 years it was correct. Then epic fury began. Within the first 72 hours, over 1,700 targets were struck across Iran. Radar networks went dark, surface military infrastructure burned. Drone and missile launch rates collapsed by 90% almost immediately, but the missile cities survived. They were engineered to survive exactly this. Conventional strikes from above. Surface explosions cannot penetrate hundreds of feet of compressed rock. You can crater the entrance to a tunnel, but the tunnel itself remains intact 50 meters down. To actually collapse a missile city, you need 3 things simultaneously. First, payload, a weapon heavy enough to penetrate deep rock before it detonates. Specifically, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, which weighs 30,000 pounds, carries 5,300 pounds of high explosive, and is designed to punch through 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. No other weapon in the inventory does this job. Second, quantity. 1 penetrator hits 1 tunnel section. A missile city is not 1 tunnel section. It is a dispersed network. To seal it permanently, you need multiple weapons hitting multiple points along the same underground structure, coordinated, sequenced, timed to collapse the network rather than simply damage one entrance. Third, range and survivability. Iran is not next door. The mission radius from available bases requires aerial refueling, extended flight duration, and enough survivability to actually reach the target and egress without being shot down by whatever air defense system is still functional. Those 3 requirements, payload, quantity, range, survivability, have to be met by a single platform simultaneously. Now run every bomber in the American inventory against that equation. The B-52 Stratofortress has been in service since 1955. It can carry 70,000 pounds of ordnance, more than enough payload, but the B-52 has a radar cross-section of approximately 100 square meters. To put that in perspective, it shows up on radar the way a small building would. Every surviving air defense system in Iran detects it at maximum range. Every surface-to-air missile battery gets the longest possible engagement window. Every fighter escort requirement doubles. Every mission demands the most intensive electronic warfare support available. That is sustainable for a limited number of strikes. It is not sustainable for a systematic campaign against hundreds of dispersed underground complexes. The B-52 can carry the weight, but the survivability equation does not close over defended Iranian airspace. The B-2 Spirit is a different problem. Near-zero radar signature, already striking the most hardened, most defended targets in Iran. Exactly the mission stealth was invented for. But the United States Air Force has 19 B-2s, 19 aircraft. Each one carries 40,000 pounds, which means each one can carry one GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, just one, because of how the weapon interfaces with the aircraft's weapons bay geometry. 19 aircraft, each delivering one 30,000-pound penetrator per sortie, cannot collapse a tunnel network dispersed across an entire country before Iran reconstitutes what launch capability it has left. The math does not work. 19 is not enough. The F-35 Lightning II is doing something different and equally critical. Suppression of enemy air defenses, electronic warfare, clearing the radar and SAM environment that allows any non-stealth aircraft to survive over Iran at all. Without the F-35s doing that work, this entire campaign looks different. But the F-35 carries 18,000 pounds maximum. The missile cities need the GBU-57. The F-35 cannot physically carry it. Iran engineered its underground complexes to survive any single American bomber type. What it did not account for was a bomber that could carry enough weapons to overwhelm the network, and the Air Force had been planning to retire it. The B-1B Lancer was supposed to be finished. Cracked airframes from years of hard use, a mission-capable rate that had dropped to around 47% at its worst point. The Air Force had already begun the transition to B-21 Raider production, and there was serious institutional momentum to pull the B-1B from service early. The airframe had problems, that much is accurate. But here's what retirement paperwork does not capture. The B-1B carries 75,000 pounds of ordnance, more than the B-52, more than twice the B-2, more than 4 times the F-35. It has 3 internal weapons bays that can be reconfigured for different weapon types and combinations. And it has something almost no other aircraft in the modern inventory has retained: variable sweep wings. This is where the physics live. At 15 degrees of sweep, the B-1B's wings extend to 177 feet. A long, narrow wing generates lift efficiently with minimal induced drag, the aerodynamic penalty every aircraft pays just for staying airborne. Low drag at that configuration means the aircraft is essentially gliding forward through the air with minimal fuel burn. Extended range, efficient cruise. Hours of flight time without the fuel consumption you would expect from an aircraft of its size. At 67.5 degrees of sweep, those same wings fold back tight against the fuselage. The aircraft becomes aerodynamically slim, optimized for speed rather than efficiency. At that sweep angle, the B-1B can exceed the speed of sound at low altitude, a capability the B-52 cannot approach, and the B-2 does not attempt. That speed at low altitude capability matters for a specific reason: terrain masking. Flying fast and low, using the terrain itself to block radar line of sight, the B-1B can approach a target area below the radar coverage envelope of surface-to-air missile systems that are looking for high-altitude threats. It is not stealth. It is geometry, using the Earth's curvature and terrain elevation to deny the radar a clean look at the aircraft until the weapons are already released. The variable sweep wing does both jobs: long sweep for range, short sweep for speed and survival. One aircraft, 2 completely different flight envelopes, switchable in real time during the mission. Now add the payload: 3 internal bays. The B-1B can carry up to 24 GBU-2041 Joint Direct Attack munitions simultaneously, GPS-guided 2,000-pound bombs, each one precise within a few meters. Or it can carry GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrators, the only weapon in existence designed specifically to collapse hardened underground facilities. Here's why quantity matters against a missile city. A tunnel network has structural logic. There are load-bearing sections, junction points, where multiple tunnels meet, ventilation shafts, fuel storage nodes, and launcher shafts. If you hit the entrance, the people inside seal the blast door and the tunnel continues functioning. If you hit the junction where multiple tunnel branches meet, you collapse connectivity between sections. If you hit the launcher shaft from above with a weapon that penetrates deep before detonating, you destroy the launch capability without needing to reach the storage chambers. The B-1B can carry enough weapons to hit multiple strategic nodes in the same tunnel network on a single pass, not one penetrating weapon. Multiple weapons, sequenced across the geographic footprint of an underground complex, hitting it from several angles, collapsing it structurally, rather than simply damaging one entrance. That is the difference between poking a hole in the network and ending the network. On the night of March 1st, the 3 B-1Bs that departed Ellsworth Air Force Base flew approximately 7,000 nautical miles with aerial refueling to reach their targets. Additional B-1B sorties operated from RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom, cutting transit time for the European leg of the campaign, 34 hours in the air, 4 crew members per aircraft. The crew rotation managed fatigue while maintaining flight continuity. The B-1B's mission systems allowed the crew to update targeting data, receive new intelligence, and adjust weapon sequencing during the flight, which meant the strike plan could be refined with real-time information rather than locked to a plan built 18 hours earlier. The missile cities near Hormuz were not simple targets. Some were cut in a mountain granite. Some had multiple hardened entrances spread over several kilometers. The sequencing of strikes, which weapon hits which structural node in what order, required analysis that started with the underground geometry of the facility and worked backward to weapon placement. That sequencing is where the payload capacity becomes decisive. If you have enough weapons, you can follow the structural logic of the tunnel network. You hit the junction first to isolate sections, then the launcher shafts to eliminate the primary threat, then the storage chambers if access permits, then the ventilation shafts to deny the facility any function even if blast doors are intact. With 24 weapons available per aircraft, that sequencing is possible. With 1 or 2, you are choosing the best single impact point and hoping. By the end of the first phase of bomber operations, the CENTCOM assessment reported over 1,000 targets struck. The specific assessment of the missile city network near Hormuz confirmed structural collapse of the primary tunnel complexes, not just surface damage, actual collapse of the underground architecture that had been designed to survive any conventional attack. The anti-ship missiles those complexes sheltered did not survive. Here's the full equation, written plainly. Iran built its missile cities around a specific assumption: no American aircraft could carry enough payload to overwhelm the network, reach deep enough targets, and survive whatever air defense remained. That assumption held for 30 years because it was accurate for 30 years. The B-1B changed all 3 variables simultaneously. Payload 75,000 pounds, the largest in the inventory. Range variable sweep wings enable efficient cruise to 7,000 nautical miles with refueling. Survivability. Terrain masking at supersonic low altitude combined with F-35 CAD operations clearing the SAM environment above. The aircraft the Air Force was retiring solved the equation that no other platform in the inventory could close. That is not luck. That is the operational logic that happens when you match the specific physics of a weapon system to the specific geometry of a target type. The B-1B was not the obvious answer. The obvious answers, the stealth aircraft, the newer platforms, each failed one leg of the 3-part requirement. The B-1B failed none of them. The B-21 Raider will eventually replace it. When it does, the Raider will add stealth to the payload and range equation, closing the one gap the B-1B still carries. But the Raider is not here in numbers yet. The B-1B was. And that raises the question that will define the next decade of American air power planning. If the aircraft with cracked airframes and a 47% readiness rate turned out to be irreplaceable in the one war that tested all 3 requirements simultaneously, what other platform currently scheduled for retirement is carrying a capability that does not exist anywhere else in the inventory? And what happens the next time the equation demands it if the answer has already been scrapped? That is not a rhetorical question. That is the problem every defense planner is now sitting with. If this kind of breakdown, systems logic, targeting geometry, the engineering beneath the headline is what you came here for, Navy reality has more of it waiting. The next video picks up where this one ends.